I loved it. And I said, I was not even familiar or aware with it. And I believe that every coach should be working with a supervisor. Why? Because no matter how much experience we have, we all have blind spots. Doesn't matter if you're an MCC. As an MCC, you are a human being. You also are triggered. You also have issues. You also have opportunity where you may feel stuck. So my position was not very popular, Lyssa.
Welcome to the Coaching Studio. I'm your host, Lyssa deHart, and today it is an honor to introduce you to Dr. Damian Goldvarg. He is an MCC and also holds a Ph.D. in organizational psychology. He served 10 years as an ICF assessor and was the 2013-2014 global president of the ICF. He is now the president of Goldvarg Coaching Group, Inc., a global consulting firm specializing in leadership development, executive coaching, and keynote speaking. With a career that spans over 30 years, Damian brings deep expertise in executive assessment, strategic planning, and team building, making him a highly sought-after speaker and trainer worldwide. In fact, he's traveled more than 3 million miles to 70 different countries. That's a lot of frequent flyer miles. As an accomplished author, Damian has co-authored 10 books, including Professional Coaching Competencies, The Complete Guide, and Revised Coaching Competencies Following Global Standards, providing invaluable resources for coaches striving to enhance their craft. His latest book, Lead with a Coaching Mindset, is available at this time in Spanish, and he's working on the English version even as we speak. In addition to his coaching credentials, he is a recipient of the prestigious ICF Circle of Distinction Award, and interestingly, he has gotten everyone in his family to receive coach training. Join me in welcoming Dr. Damian Goldvarg to the studio as we dive into his vast insights on coaching, leadership, and the art of developing global competencies in today's diverse world. Damian, it is a true pleasure to have you here in the studio with me today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for the invitation. Looking forward to talking to you and sharing some of my experiences and also learning from you too, having a productive dialogue.
We'll see how that goes. I think you maybe have more to teach than I do at this time, but let's get into it. So I typically start off with really wanting to kind of get a sense of that evolution, like how you found coaching or how coaching found you. And I would love to sort of hear your genesis.
Well, my background originally is as a psychologist. So I went to school to become a therapist to help people to deal with their emotional issues. And I was following my parents, Lyssa, because both of my parents are psychologists. And I really admire them. I want to be like them. So I went to the same university that them, University of Buenos Aires. And eventually I moved to the United States. And I always realized that I care more about organizational work and working with groups. I love groups and I love teaching. So I went back to school and I got a Ph.D. in organizational psychology. And in the process, I developed a leadership program to train leaders here locally in Los Angeles in Spanish so I can support immigrants to become leaders and support their development so they can get the opportunity to inspire others. So that was my vision. And when I was doing that work, I need to leave. So I was still working. So it was hard because I was working full-time and going to school full-time for a few years. And I specialized in AIDS work. So I did a lot of work with, at that time, we're talking about the 90s, 91, 92, like more than 30 years ago. And I was working for AIDS Project Los Angeles, here locally in Los Angeles. And I was running support groups. So I was training facilitators to facilitate support groups. I was facilitating groups. And then I was working with families and children living with HIV and AIDS. And I'm sharing that because I do believe that that really impacted my life because I was young and really made me old fast. But also helped me to see what's really important. I think that these values are what's really important when you're dealing with life and death. you really look at life and you look at relationships and you look at what is important. And I do believe that impacted some of my career later.
Yeah. It really puts you on the front lines also, of working with those really powerful human experiences.
Yes, and make you feel you're contributing. It's very meaningful work because you're supporting people to deal with very traumatic, challenging experiences and bring the best quality of life that they can for whatever rest of their life they have. So it has been really inspiring, sometimes challenging, difficult.
Yeah.
But that I think that I bring this with me to all of my work, looking at priorities, looking at what is important, looking at the relationships. And when I got, finally I got my PhD and I got a job, that's a job that sent me all over the world. So I moved from doing all of this aid work to do leadership development, not locally for Latino immigrants, but for global leaders. So I work for a company called Personnel Decisions International, and they sent me to train leaders on coaching skills and leadership skills all over the world. And I was very lucky because I had the opportunity to travel in many countries all over. Starting in Latin America, started in Spanish and working in all Latin American countries. And then at one point, I had the opportunity to work in Europe. And then at another point, I had the opportunity to work in Asia. So I accumulated a lot of mileage that my family benefited from. So all of the mileage, I got my family to go to trips. But now I don't have any more after COVID. After COVID, I said, okay, that's enough. No more traveling for me. Now I am very comfortable at home. I love working from home. I had traveled a lot, and now it's time to enjoy being at home.
Yeah, I have to say, my husband has to travel every month for work, and I love the reward miles. They just make my life happier. So good for your family. I think that's where I'm going with that. What brought you then? Like, I mean, as you are doing this work, and somewhere along the way, you find coaching and decide, hey, this is something I'm interested in doing. What was, like, how did you transition from all of this sort of facilitation, organizational psychology, and really taking these psychological ideas and decide that coaching was a good place to deploy those skill sets?
When I was hired for this company to do the training, so I was hired as a trainer. A couple of weeks in my job, they say, oh, by the way, would you like to coach some of these executives? So you don't do only training, but we would like you also to do coaching, and we would like you to also do assessments of executives. Through assessment centers. I don't know if you're familiar, assessment center, where they bring executives and they go through simulations, and most of the employees are psychologists, so we have a psychological background. So we role play and we do different exercises and activities, and we evaluate executives, and we come up with development plans so that we can help them to prepare for the next job. So, and coaching was part of that too. So from one day to another, I became a coach without training or just, okay, work with people, help them. You're a psychologist, you're supposed to know what to do. And so when I left the company 2 years later, after coaching leaders for many years, I went through coaching training because I never had a coaching training. And I wanted to have that competitive advantage. So that's the reason why I tell people, it doesn't matter what is your background. This is my personal belief, that you, and I thought about that even before I became ICF Global President, because you can say I'm not very objective, being the past president, I may have an agenda, but before that, I thought, okay, I want to have a competitive advantage. I want to demonstrate that I'm serious about my commitment to do coaching. So I want to have a credential. I went through coaching training. I got my credential. And I believe that would give me credibility. It will give the message to people that I follow ethical standards. And then also if I am competing with other colleagues for jobs, I may have a competitive advantage for having a credential. So we're talking about, that was in 2003. So that was 20 years ago. And then as a coach, I needed to renew my credential, and I got involved in my local chapter. And then it was an opportunity to be in the board in 2009. And then I got involved in my local chapter as a board member. And then I had to choose if I would go to be a president of the local chapter, or if I would go to the global board. And I decided to go to the global board. And then I was in the board for 6 years. It was like a part-time job as a volunteer. Not a job for, how much time people spend in these boards and task forces.
I mean, let's just take a moment and thank every volunteer in every ICF chapter, because that is an unpaid volunteer part-time, if not even partially full-time. Like as a past president, I also had that experience of, it was kind of a full-time job. It was kind of a full-time job as the president of that chapter. And so just a big thank you to all the ICF volunteers in all of the chapters and all the boards. Thank you for your service.
And you know what, Lyssa, sometimes people don't have a clue how many hours people spend doing that.
I don't
only them know how many hours they put together, and sometimes they even lose track of. There are so many hours. Like I have in my calendar color coded, and when I was in the global board, I have all of this red. ICF was red. My work was green, and everything was red. And then when I left the board and everything was green, I said, okay, I can see the difference now. That was funny.
It's amazing. Yeah, no, when I left the position of ICF, past president, when I was finally done with my tenure with the ICF board here in Washington, it was like all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I have so much time. I mean, it was crazy. It was hilarious. So, but then you also, I mean, you didn't just stop at ACC, you didn't just stop at PCC. What was the drive towards getting the mastery level of coaching distinction for you?
Well, it's interesting because when I got my PCC, I never thought that I would be interested in MCC. I thought, okay, this is too far away. Like we think that way, 2,500 hours, that would never happen.
Yeah.
And then it happened. So I had the hours. Okay, I said, okay, it's time for me to apply. And I applied, and eventually I became an MCC. I didn't pass the first time. I had to do it the second time. It was still, there are high standards. And then when I became an assessor too, because I thought, okay, I'm going to help people to support ICF with that task, because there were not many people at that time doing it in Spanish.
Yeah,
so I want to support the Spanish speaker colleagues. So that's also why I got involved at that time in 2010. Yeah. So now it's 14 years that I have been doing this job as an assessor. And I think it's rewarding being able to support people, but there are high standards. It's not that everybody does not pass the recording the first time.
No,
sometimes people had to send 2 times or 3 times, and I had to do it 2 times. So it was a humbling learning experience.
But I think it is a valuable learning experience. Yes. And I mean, I think I do ICF assessing at the PCC level, and I don't think every recording passes there either. And I think that it's actually probably good to know that, like, passing is great, like, yay, if that happens the first time. But the reality is this is a growth process where you're really learning to stretch yourself beyond how you have gone from your ACC training. You cannot take that same work into your MCC or really even into your PCC, depending on what program you go through. And how do you continue to develop and evolve yourself? Which really sort of leads me to my next question for you, which is, how has your coaching philosophy evolved through the years? And maybe what are some of the influences to those changes?
Well, I think that something that made a difference for me was when I received supervision training. So when I went through supervision, you bring your coaching to the next level, because when you start supervising coaches, you see yourself in the coaches too. It's like when you're coaching clients, you learn with your client. Well, here in supervision, you learn when you're supervising from other coaches. So I started looking at things I was not paying attention before.
Yeah.
So, for example, I think I developed a higher level of awareness of systemic issues. So everything that is systemic, looking at how we are the intersection of all of the groups that we belong to. Mm-hmm. And looking at how the context is affecting the text, how whatever is happening around us is affecting us. So this muscle of, looking at things systemically, looking at all of these different components, all of the stakeholders that are involved. I think that was one of the areas. And the second area will be about self as instrument, using us as instruments. Is like taking our awareness. Like I like to share, one of the ways that I like to think is our job as coaches is to support our clients so they can get higher level of awareness that will allow them to do things they would have not done without this awareness. So it's about effectiveness, it's about results, it's about doing things, but it requires an exploration of the being, how we are showing up in our lives, and what is the level of awareness that we have about ourselves, and paying attention and being aware of what's happening around us.
Yeah.
So that higher level of awareness allow us to be more intentional in our behaviors.
Yeah.
Get results, support others. And I think that this is the reason why we coaches are very passionate about coaching, because we love seeing people getting higher level of awareness and new possibilities for their lives, new relationship, new results.
Yeah. Well, and it's sort of interesting. You and I have a similar background. I don't have a PhD in organizational psychology, but I was a clinical social worker for 20 years. And so I got supervision. I've probably been in some form of supervision since 1989 because I was doing work with rape crisis at that time. And for me, when I went through the coaching supervision training program, it changed the way I viewed supervision. What was your experience as the difference? Because as a psychologist and doing therapy with your patients or your clients, I mean, you were getting supervision, one would assume, right? I'm making an assumption, but
No, you're right, because even before I get my PhD in organizational psychology, I had a master's in counseling and my license as a marriage and family therapist.
There you go. Yeah.
So I don't have that background too. And so I had supervision from the beginning. But being honest, Lyssa, I was not familiar with coaching supervision till I was in the global board and we were discussing the future of coaching. And we were looking at the EMCC, European Mentor Coaching and Counsel. It's a sister association of ICF in Europe.
Yeah.
And for them, they, since I was in the board for 2010 to 2016. 2010 already, so I'm talking 14 years ago, already was mandatory for all coaches to receive supervision to renew their credentials. So we're thinking what we're going to do. And when I went through coaching supervision training, I loved it. And I said, I was not even familiar or aware with it. And I believe that every coach should be working with a supervisor. Why? Because no matter how much experience we all have blind spots. Yes. It doesn't matter if you're an MCC. As an MCC, you are a human being. You also are triggered. You also have issues. You also have opportunity where you may feel stuck. Yeah. So my position was not very popular, Lyssa.
Well, I think it's becoming more popular. And just a real quick plug for the EMCC. We're both members. You and I both are members. Yes. And I'm very much looking forward to being in the training with you in a week or two, I think, with the EMCC. But I mean, I'll be honest, when I first came into coaching after working, I was primarily doing trauma therapy and relationship therapy, so couples work and trauma. And so when I got into coaching really deeply, I was like, how hard is this? This isn't hard at all. I don't need supervision anymore. And so I really took probably 5 years off of supervision. And then before I started getting the training, I'd been talking with Sam McGill, who's somebody who I love dearly and who's been a very big advocate of supervision in North America. And I was like, okay, I need to start doing this. And so I started getting supervision, and then I took the training and then continued getting supervision. I'm still in supervision. I get supervision every year because, to your point, we all have blind spots. And even if the blind spot is a bias that is positive, like, Damian, I like you so much that I'm just more of a cheerleader than actually a thought partner, right? And so I think it's crucial that we have these places where we can challenge ourselves and be challenged, or look at it from a slightly different viewpoint than we would normally have done it, because these blind spots they impact unconsciously how we are showing up with people. So I love that you brought the supervision into the conversation, because I think it's just really crucially important.
Quick interruption. And I just want to say thank you so much for being on my channel, for liking and subscribing to the work that I'm doing. It means a great deal to me, and I'm very appreciative of it. I also want to extend an invitation to my monthly Q&As so that you have an opportunity. If you're a coach, it's my treat. Sign up below or follow the link, and you can come each month and have an opportunity to get a resource development CCE, as well as participate in a really rich conversation about how we show up as coaches and what we would like to have be playing with in our own work, basically. So you are invited, and thank you for being here.
What do you see as sort of the emerging trends in coaching that are really going to impact the future of coaching?
So, well, supervision is one of them. I was saying it took 10 years, because when I went through that program in 2013 was the first time that CSA came to the United States. And I also worked with Sam. Sam was my facilitator, so I really respect him very much. And now, finally, ICF came up with a competency model. They just came up with a competency model for supervision, one for mentor coaching. So I think some of these trends is professionalizing, having more standards for supervision, for mentor coaching, for team coaching. Mm-hmm. Team coaching is another area. ICF came up with a credential last year. So I do believe that ICF is always on top of, okay, what's next? And this is where I pay attention to, okay, what are people doing? What kind of work they are doing? Mm-hmm. And this week, I don't know if you saw, Lyssa, that ICF came up with a standard for AI work.
Yes, I did. I downloaded all of it so that I can read it over the holidays.
Yes, it's a long document.
Yes.
But everything related to technology and AI, this is what's coming up. And how I believe that some of the work we do will be replaced by AI, like all areas of life. You know, you see some AI replacing some of the work of accountants, travel planners, financial planners. A lot of work is being supported by AI, even medicine, physicians. So I believe that also we can use and take advantage of all of these technological development for our work. So I tell people, don't worry about technology. You're not competing with technology, but you are competing with coaches who are embracing technology. Yeah. So if you don't like technology, if you don't like AI, if you don't want to learn, if you are doing like, I don't want to listen about it, I don't want to say, you are in trouble. You are in trouble, because the people who are, these are the ones who are going to have the future. The clients will go to look for them, and this is what's going to happen. So I think that this is why we all need to be paying attention to how to enhance our skills around technology and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, I just really want to emphasize this. If you are, I don't really have a dog in the kennel of whether you should be focused on AI or not. That's kind of an individual choice, but I do think it's a bit of sticking your head in the sand, thinking like you're an ostrich, and it's coming whether you like it or not. So it's like maybe take your head out of the sand, but that's a choice that people have. But I think to the other point that you're making here, which I think is crucially important for coaches specifically to hear, and really a lot of industries, to include psychology and things in those different arenas of law, medicine, lots of different places. If you are the most basic version of your craft, you will be replaced by AI, because AI can follow the same metric you're following. It's got the same 100 really great coaching questions, and it can put them in order and ask them, and somebody's going to get whatever level of benefit that is, and they're going to get it on an app that they have a subscription to for, I don't know, $10 a month or something like that. So it is really, I think, important for coaches, based on what you're saying, this development of our craft. Like, I don't care if you never leave ACC. If you go, I want to be an ACC forever, that's great. I don't even know that you need a credential, but you can learn to partner more fully with the people, the thinkers with whom you work, and become masterful at your craft without a credential. I think the credential, to your earlier point, gives you a level of legitimacy that organizations and people and consumers are looking for. But I think you can be a masterful coach with a ACC or PCC or no CCC.
I agree with you. I agree completely. So Lyssa, part of my job is to train coaches. So I train coaches, I train mentor coaches, and I train supervisors. And when I train coaches, I say, you don't have to wait to be an MCC credential coach to demonstrate some of the traits of a master coach. So when I train them, I say, okay, pay attention. How do you embrace silence? How is your presence? How is your connection? How is the quality of your listening? So I agree with you. I'm not agree 100%, even though I wrote a book about it. I wrote a book about coaching competencies. So I have been talking about competency, Lyssa, for my first book came up on coaching competencies in Spanish because my goal was to support the Latino coaches worldwide, or the Spanish speaker coaches worldwide, because there was nothing in Spanish even before I started in the board. So I think that but the book on coaching competencies, the first one in Spanish, came. I think I published it in 2013. Yeah. And so I have been talking about coaching competencies for 10 years, and then it was translated to English, so that the book in English is available. That's the first one that you mentioned today. Then I updated the Spanish version. I never updated the English version yet with the new competencies.
Well, I see another thing on your to-do list.
You're right. That's it there. And related to the competencies, I believe that we need to follow them, but we have to be careful because sometimes people are so worried about competencies and markers and behavior that they don't realize that different clients need different things. Mm-hmm. And not all clients want to have a transformational experience. Many clients, particularly in organizations, want less a coaching experience and more a mentoring or consulting experience. And I believe that we need to give choices to our clients. But if they choose consulting versus coaching, there is nothing wrong about it.
Right. It's just a different tool, right?
Exactly. It's a different tool. It's a different process. There is nothing wrong about it. We do have a lot of experience. I have a Ph.D. in organizational psychology. I have been training leaders for many years. I have a lot to say. Now, when I am coaching, I don't have anything to say. When I am coaching, I am just there to hold the space for people to think. Mm-hmm. And holding the space for people to think is sometimes more difficult than to share what you know. Mm-hmm. So this is I think the challenge for many experienced coaches.
And a couple of things that you're saying, I love, which is one, I think especially the new competencies, like the old competencies, the 11 that we had, I'm so thankful for the transition in 2019, 2020 into the new competencies. I really love them. They speak to me in a more thoughtful way than the old competencies did. And I think they're a really important framework. And so but I also think it's like anything, right? Like, I don't know, what else do you do that you do really well, whether it's cooking or painting or photography or poetry or writing. In your case, you probably write really well. My guess, though, is that you had to learn sort of the fundamentals of what was required in order to become masterful at whatever that is that you do. And I think understanding the competencies is really important. And to your point, I get this in my mentor coaching groups also, and in my courses, where people are they're fixated on the markers or the competencies to such an extent that they're no longer present with the human being in front of them. And it's like, I say, like, just forget about the markers and the competencies for a moment. Like, just put them out of your head. Be here now with this human being. Get a good agreement, but the rest should follow if you have a good agreement. And if that's all you're working on, that's coaching, right?
Lyssa, this is exactly what I tell my students too.
You and I,
so we have been reading our minds.
It's a mind meld. It's a Vulcan thing.
Lyssa, because the magic happens in the relationship. Magic happens in the connection, not in the following step by step. You still need to do it. So I tell people, okay, this is paradoxical because you need to do it, but you have to forget about it. So
and that takes that is the learning journey, right?
Yeah,
like you learn it, you don't know what you don't know, and then you know what you don't know, right? But then you're on that journey towards unconscious competence. That's the goal, is that it's in your bones enough that you know it and you can draw on it. And to your other point, not every person in every single situation is going to want pure coaching like that. And that isn't the point, is that you should rigidly adhere to this model regardless. Just lay it across every single human being you come across, because it's not going to work that way for every single human being you come across. So how are we flexible? And at times people need ideas, or they need you to be sharing some story. Now, please, if you're taking the ICF credentialing exam, stay in the pure coaching mindset, right? Because that's what they're testing you for. Or if you're sending in a demonstration for an assessor like Damian or I to assess, please be the coach.
and choose the right recording. Because sometimes I listen to these recordings and I say, who sent this recording? The enemy of the coach, because this client was not helping at all. You were not answering the questions, but we were not good recordings. So sometimes it's also about choosing the right recording. And do you know what? Maybe the recording that you are sharing is not your best job. It's not the best thing that you can show. So you need to keep doing it. Sometimes people lose the patience and they are not patient any longer, and they just send the recording with knowing that it may or may not pass, just taking a risk. I tell people, don't do that. Just do as many recordings as you need till you have one that you feel proud of.
Yeah.
When you feel proud of your recording, you send it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you have to have what you're saying, that connection, that presence.
Yeah. And if you're impatient about it and you feel like giving up, that's when you need supervision. So
yes. Exactly. So I hope that people at least listening to us, if they have never received supervision, they are curious about it. And Lyssa, I have an offer too, because I train supervisors, and our supervisors, they are always looking for coaches to practice with. So if anybody who's hearing us would like to get an experience
I'll definitely
supervision,
be sending your LinkedIn. I'll have your LinkedIn in the notes so people can get a hold of you if you want to experience supervision for a lower price point.
Free. This is free.
Oh, wow, that's a really low price point.
This is free, but there is a caveat. The sessions need to be recorded, because the supervisor gets feedback
from
it has to be recorded because they get feedback from their work by there is a supervisor who listens to them.
I'm raising my hand for this, Damian.
And providing feedback. Now, before you were talking about one of my favorite topics, that is coaching myth. What are the myths in the coaching profession? And what are these ideas that people have that are a myth, are not reality, are misunderstandings of ICF philosophy, way of understanding coaching, competencies, markers. So this is maybe for another session. But this myth, for example, that you never, ever give advice, is a myth. Coaching is not about giving advice and people telling what to do, but there is a space to share best practices.
Yeah.
In the right place at the right time, after the client has done all of the work.
Yes. And I say this too, like in facilitating client growth, at the end of the conversation, if the thinker has had like some insights, great. But if there's still some things that are like big gaping holes, it might be a place to say, may I offer that there's a couple things that didn't come up that might be useful for you to consider. And you share that with them, and that's still in the coaching. You're still being a coach and you're still staying within in that framework. So thank you for sharing that. And that probably is another conversation. We can talk about coaching myths and probably spend an hour just doing that. I would really like to transition a little bit, if it's okay, into your newest book around leadership and why. First, you were talking about things like how leaders build resilience in both themselves and their team in facing this uncertain and volatile experience we're all having on this planet at this time, whether it's through human interaction or nature interaction. How can coaches work with leaders to support building resilience?
This is a great question. And when you were talking about trends, we talk about supervision, mentoring, team coaching. The other trend is supporting leaders to develop coaching skills. So when you're working with leaders to support them to be resilient, you're also helping them to become better coaches of their teams.
Yes.
And it's about creating coaching cultures. So I do believe that we as coaches have also a role to support leaders to build these coaching cultures in their organizations. And related to that, because resilience is about that, it's about having the flexibility to develop people around them so they can be successful, effective. And there is one more thing that when you work, like I'm thinking, like in a coaching session, you hear your client saying things, and then you go back to what they said before.
Yeah.
Like here, I'm putting things together. You are talking about what impacted my coaching. So when I work on resilience with my clients, particularly in leadership, I go back to other of my ways of thinking. We talk about systemic thinking, self as instrument. The third element that I use in my approach is working on foresight. Foresight is the study of the future. So I went to get 2 different certifications as a foresight practitioner because I thought to be an effective coach for the leaders that I'm working with, I need to develop skills to support the leaders to look at the future and be prepared for the future. So to be future ready, to be future prepared. This is foresight. It's about getting ready for the future. So when I work with my clients to be their resilient, they need to look systemically too. They also need to look self as instrument, who they are being as leaders, but also they need to look at the future and pay attention and invest time in thinking, okay, what's coming? How am I going to deal with that? And also have the flexibility. Like in my head, for example, now we are dealing with elections. Like in my head, I thought that the elections will go in different ways. And now many of us have to adjust to this new reality. And I do believe it's going to be a lot of work coming up about a lot of different issues that.
And that's interesting because the idea of like civility, I mean, no matter what you want to do personally in your life and how you want to show up on social media, how you show up in an organization requires us to be able to have a way that we interact relationally with those people that we work with. And in incivility, I mean, I don't know what the cost of incivility in organizations is, but I think like SHRM or some organization did a study on it. And I want to say it's in the billions of dollars.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting times coming up. And I believe that we as coaches need to navigate this with our clients and to support them in building the skills and awareness and self-awareness so they can manage the challenges that they are going to see, that sometimes they are new and they are different. We're talking about, you mentioned LinkedIn before, I have been talking about politics at work.
Yeah, I don't either.
How to manage that, how to navigate that, because people have reactions, emotional reactions, and what is appropriate and what is not appropriate.
Yeah. So already starting to plant that, how do we have these conversations at work or how do we step out of them? I mean, for me, it's sort of like, what is the energy I want to spend on certain conversations? And personally, I have zero, like a big goose egg, zero interest in being energetically in an argument. It's just not something I'm interested in. But I think, to your point, there are a lot of people who are still, whether they're super excited or they're super depressed, it doesn't really matter, right? Like, either way, that energy is going to interact, and it's going to interact in the workspace. So how do you tamp down your enthusiasm or tamp down and acknowledge your sadness, but also create that resilience so that you can be in the same spaces with people who may be very different than you in philosophy about whatever. You know, there was another question I had around this, and I think it really comes out of what you've been talking about, which is how coaching skills, because you're teaching leaders to be more coach-like, right? And have more of a coaching mindset. How can coaching skills support leaders in creating these healthy, collaborative work environments?
Yeah. So that is exactly the philosophy of my book. This is exactly why I wrote the book, because I want to answer that question.
So which is why I asked it, just so we're clear.
So here is the book in Spanish. I am very proud of this book. This is my book number 9 that came out a few months ago in Spanish. And it's a little bit different title in English than in Spanish. Originally, this book was going to be called Post-COVID Leadership. So how to deal post-COVID, how to deal with the consequences of COVID. And then people tell me, no, nobody wants to hear about COVID. So don't even mention it in the title. So, okay, change of title and change of a lot of part of the book, because I keep talking about post-COVID leadership, Okay. So we change it, remove it. No more post-COVID. It's about current time. What is called leadership for current times? The Spanish version. The English version
say it in Spanish for me, Damian.
Liderazgo para los tiempos actuales. Leadership for current times, and the subtitle is Nuevos paradigmas y habilidades de coaching. New paradigms and coaching skills. So people get a sense when they get the book, okay, what is this book about? And I really like the picture. I don't know what the picture will be in English, but in Spanish, I don't know if you get to see the lines here. Yeah. And it's about the future, but it's a woman. So not a male. Instead of a male, a female leader, for a change. So I like to,
Well, and in organizations, we have lots of female leaders. I mean, not as many as maybe we need, but the numbers are growing for sure. But back to this question, like, how do coaching skills support these leaders in creating these healthier environments?
Well, the idea is that by developing coaching skills, they can create coaching cultures. So a coaching culture is a culture that values people. Not only what they are saying, but what they are doing to demonstrate that value. They provide opportunities for people to learn, to grow. Leaders spend time, invest. It's an investment. They invest time in having conversations with their colleagues, their direct reports, about what is important to them, about their future, about what they need, about who they are. So the idea is that when leaders realize the importance of coaching their staff and the importance of spending time in understanding them, showing that they care, being supportive, and supporting them to build a future that they want, they get higher level of engagement. So in my book, I talk about Gallup. Gallup has done a lot of research on engagement, what makes people engaged and satisfied at work.
Did you say Gallup?
Gallup, yes.
Gallup Strengths Finders, is that the...
Yes. That company. This is one, I like to follow some places, some organizations. So I like Gallup's research. I like what they have to say about work, the future of work. I follow Harvard Business Review.
Yes.
And they're thinking. I follow Kimsey. I follow different organizations, and related to that, I all the time getting information from them about what are the trends, what are their different research that they are doing. And I really like the Wall Street Journal have a section on Fridays that is called The Future of Everything. Have you heard about that, Lyssa?
No, but I think I'm going to have to check it out.
Yes, it's an amazing resource. And personally for me, because I am interested in foresight and the study of the future.
Yeah.
So the Wall Street Journal has a really interesting section. So I get that newsletter in particular for that section. So every Friday I get that because it's really interesting. And so the idea is that in the book, I talk about the different competencies. So I follow the ICL competency model. So each chapter is a competency. So for example, ethical leadership, contracting relationships at work, trust, building trust, presence, listening, creating awareness and learning, supporting colleagues with plans. So the idea is that how you apply all of these competencies that we use in coaching to the work of the leader. So this is what is the book about and how it's presented. So by developing these skills, they will be effective to have more effective coaching conversations.
Well, and I imagine you get people saying, well, yeah, but I mean, challenges are so complex. Things are moving so quickly. How do you do this coach approach if, you're in a firestorm of some, like whatever it is that's happening in the world? How do you respond to how this approach is effective, regardless of the fact that there are complex challenges in the world?
Well, the idea is that these conversations may be happening during these moments of crisis, challenges, and difficult times. So it's not something necessarily that you need to add to what you are doing, but it's looking at what you are doing from a different place. Is when you need to deal with this situation. Are there opportunities for coaching moments? If it's an opportunity to ask somebody what they think needs to happen or maybe needs to be done versus you telling them what to do.
Something that just came up as you were talking is it's kind of like life. If you decide you're going to, I've heard meditation is good for me and I'm in the middle of a crisis. So now I'm going to start I'm going to meditate. You're never going to meditate because you don't know how. You haven't built that you haven't built the white matter in your brain to be able to even get your brain into a meditative state. But I'm also hearing that part of this is if you really want to be effective in navigating complex challenges, you need to be practicing this coaching mindset way prior to the challenge that's showing up. So this is really the value of getting a coaching mindset whenever you can start now, but it's going to help you over time, not in this one crisis that brought you here, if I'm hearing you correctly.
You're right. It's an ongoing experience, and as coaches we keep growing and learning and developing, so it doesn't matter how much coaching you're doing, there is always an opportunity to keep learning to be even more effective. So I do believe that when leaders develop this coaching mindset, they are a magnet for talent, because talent want to work with leaders who invest time in their development, particularly younger generations.
Yeah.
They want to work with leaders who are coaching them to support them so they can grow, learn. So people may tell you, like one of the stories in my book is somebody who wanted to hire a person that was really great and was very excited about having this person in the company, and the person declined the offer. So they went through a big deal, interviewed a lot of people, spent a lot of money, had the perfect candidate, and when they have the candidate, they offered the job. The candidate declined, so my client was interested. Why this?
What
happened? And it said that during the interview, it didn't feel that the leader would be coaching him and developing him and would be committed to working with him compared to other places. So he thought in this other company we had more opportunities for learning and growth. It's a good message, isn't it?
It's a powerful message. I know in your book also there's how do leaders bring their own experience and their own personal growth into their leadership style. How do they do that in a way that's useful? I guess this is almost a mirror of how does a coach bring their wisdom and not just their curiosity, but also something that they know into a conversation. How do leaders do this?
Well, first, they need to be intentional. So I do a lot of work with my clients about being intentional. Being intentional means you are doing what you're doing versus doing it automatically. You always do it without thinking, as the way that you always do everything. Here, you need to be intentional. You need to have an intention. You need to have awareness. Sometimes also, Lyssa, it's very important to have an accountability partner.
Yeah.
And that's the reason why it's so good for leaders to work with a coach. Because the coach can be that accountability partner that may be there with them to support them in implementing this, in being intentional, in being sure that they are showing up as the leaders they want to be. So that's the reason why I believe that companies that invest in developing a coaching culture, they hire coaches, they train leaders with coaching skills. Sometimes they train their own people to become internal coaches. So these are all components. So this is a missing opportunity for leaders who are not working with others to support them in being the best leaders they can be.
Yeah. And I think when you're saying accountability, it's, when you pay money to be coached, there's intrinsic accountability already there because you're going to need to talk about this again in a week or two.
You're right.
And so what are you doing? It isn't about the coach being like, all right, you need to text me 5 times a day or anything like that. But it's really about that intrinsic accountability of I'm investing in myself. And as a result of that, I also am having regular conversations with somebody and I'm looking at myself and then I'm going away with the things that I believe are going to be useful for me to play with. And now I'm going to get to come back and kind of debrief out what I learned, like what worked, what didn't work, how do I tweak it, what do I do differently? And I think that's really important, is that piece of accountability, because I don't know, my husband always uses this phrase, slow, fast, fast, right, and cheap. And he goes, you can only pick 2. And I mean, if you want to be a leader who's like quickly moving through these skill sets so that you're developing them, you can do it slow and cheap by just reading books and trying stuff on your own. But with a coach, I think you get to do it fast and right, but you're not going to do it cheap at that point, right? Like that's off the table. Cheap and right just takes a very long time, and it requires a level of commitment and I think courage, because kind of going back to our conversation around supervision, leaders have blind spots too. And so how do they see the blind spots if they're not working with another human being who can say, may I share an observation of what I'm noticing, and how does that land on you? And what have you heard from your teams? And what have you heard from your people?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. What did, I think I would just kind of one last question. How do you see leaders balancing their focus on achieving quarterly results, in these 89-day cycles that leaders find themselves in, and the need to build how does that balance between these fiscal responsibilities and building a strong collaborative environment for their workers?
That's a great question. And what I ask leaders when they ask me that question in the context, I ask them a question is, what is the cost of not spending time on that? What is the cost of you not investing in developing the culture that you want? So you have to look from that perspective. If you don't do that, what is the cost? And sometimes there is a blind spot there. They may not see that there is a cost, but they start realizing, okay, if people are not engaged, if they are not bringing their best, if they don't feel valued, whatever is accomplished is short term, and sometimes it's based on fear of losing the job, not really in being committed. So the quality is not the same. So are you thinking, and here is another piece, what is my bias, Lyssa, this I am always thinking long term, not short term. Are you thinking short term or long term? Are you just working on this fire right now, but what happens in the future? So if you really want to look at the future, you want to have continuity. If you have a workforce that is not happy, satisfied, engaged, committed, you may get your numbers today, but this is not a long-term solution. So if you don't spend time now, you will see the results later. It's like sometimes I do this example about working out. Because I'm getting soon to get to 60, and I think I have never been in better shape in my life. Like I work out, I pay attention to my body, much better than when I was 20 or 30 because I didn't need to. Mm-hmm. But it's an investment because I know that everything that I am investing in my health now is going to make a difference in the next 10 or 20 years. So now I can also ask myself, do I have time to go to the gym? No, I don't, but I go anyways.
Yeah.
So it's about how you look at your priorities. And sometimes we realize that our priorities are in a bad place when it's late. So that's invitation for the leaders who are listening to us is what are your priorities?
Well, and it almost goes back to like, what do you wish you had done differently just even 20 years ago, right? Because you would have had that accrued interest on whatever the habit was that you're trying to create. And I'm a believer, and I'm making an assumption here, but I get the sense that you are also, is wherever you find yourself, now is the time to start. But if you had started 20 years ago, that would have been, now is the time to start. And then you'd have had 20 years of accrued, interest on that behavior, that habit, or whatever. And to your point, as I'm getting close to 60 also, and the window is shrinking also on the other side of those changes need to happen now, because otherwise it changes the outcome of the end of your life. And this kind of even circles back to where we even started. I mean, we're given a short amount of time, some of us shorter, some of us longer, but we all have a birth date, right? We were born, and we all have an end date where we will no longer be here. And what are we doing with that time in between is crucially important to how we show up in our lives and the relationships that are important to us. And I think that applies probably across the board into almost everything. One of the things that I would love to ask you, I know you've written 10 books, but beyond your own work, you've mentioned a few things like the Gallup organization, and you've mentioned, Harvard Business Review, and you've also mentioned now the Wall Street Journal, the forecast, and I'm interested in all of those, and I'll put those links in the show notes. But besides your own work, is there any book or philosophy that you really feel it would impact and positively benefit any coaches listening or leaders listening to this call today?
Well, one of the things we were talking briefly before we started the session today, one of the things that I have learned that I use in some of my work with the right client, and this is again, who are the right clients for this? But when I wrote my dissertation for my Ph.D., and at that time I was working with people living with HIV and AIDS, my dissertation was on burnout. And this was in 97. At that time, people were not talking like now, burnout, everybody knows what is it. But at that time it was something new. And I was interested in how to support professionals working in the AIDS field not to get burned out doing that work, because I was getting burned out myself.
Right.
And I decided to take the perspective of spirituality. So I was thinking how being spiritual, not religious, but spiritually different. Mm-hmm. Spiritual in connecting with something else that will give you the strength, the energy to do your work and to live your life. So what are your beliefs about spirituality? And related to, can be nature, can be the universe, like I believe that there is something else, may not be God as is thought in religions, but there is some loss, something going on, whatever you call it, the universe, I call it, I like to call it that way. There is something else. So how do you connect to that energy? And so I did my dissertation on the topic because I believe that paying attention to this energy, so what's happening around you, having high level of awareness that can support you and help you to deal with crisis, trauma, challenges, difficulties. And that's been like, now it's called mindfulness at that time.
Yes.
At that time, we didn't have mindfulness concept, it didn't exist. But I was talking in my dissertation about mindfulness.
We called it just meditation, I think.
Yeah, meditation, centering. So I do believe that that's something that I use in my work is centering, meditation, and then spirituality, whatever works for you or whatever it is for you. One of the things that I like to follow around spirituality is the Course in Miracles that talk about love and fear. So when we have a challenge, are we focusing on love or are we focusing on fear? This is what you have in your background there, the message from John Lennon. And it sounds simplistic, but I like Marianne Williamson. So return to love in the right time or place. There is another book, Lyssa, that I really like. It's called Love is Letting Go of Fear. Have you heard about that book?
No, but Love is Letting Go of Fear sounds like a book that's right up my alley. The other one that I really have found so much benefit from is The Untethered Soul. That's another book that I just absolutely have adored. But Love is Letting Go of Fear, I believe that to be true. That fits with my personal philosophy.
And that book was given to me as a present for one of the participants in my coaching trainings at USC. I trained at the University of Southern California, trained coaching program. And this Love is Letting Go of Fear is not a book for everybody. And when I suggest it to my clients, I give a lot of caveats and I say, okay, listen, just take whatever works for you. There is some Christian terminology that I cannot relate to, but you need to let that go and you need to use whatever works for you.
Right.
And I do believe that there are some ideas, for example, about forgiveness.
Yeah.
I believe that when we can forgive ourselves and forgive others, and we live our life without any feelings of unfinished businesses because we cannot forgive ourselves or others, we are lighter.
Yeah.
And we get inner peace. What I do believe is a goal for many of us, how to live a life where you have inner peace.
Yeah.
And I do believe that forgiving ourselves and others is one of the ways to do that. And so there is a message about that in this book. So
yeah, and I think that's so powerful. It kind of is that conversation we were having earlier. I just have zero energy to put into an argument. I don't even know what the argument is that I would be willing to even put 10% energy into anymore. I just don't have the energy for it because I'd rather spend that energy in that tiny time that I have left on this planet on things that are more meaningful to me, like my husband or my dogs or going and writing books and catching up with you and having,
Do you know why that, Lyssa? Because you don't need to be right. When we don't need to be right, our life is much lighter.
Yes, right. And not fighting reality as one of the Buddhist tenets, right? Suffering is normal but we suffer because we don't like reality. Just get in line with reality and you suffer less. My final question comes from the guest that came before you, and my final question, it came from the guest before you, and it is this question. What is it that you do to keep yourself at that mastery level of coaching, and how do you sustain it?
So what I do is I work with a supervisor. I work with somebody who can help me see what I am not seeing. Because we need to have the humility to know that we have blind spots.
Yeah.
So to keep my skills and my practice and my work is working with somebody to help me to see what I'm not seeing.
Well, and then one more thing before we go, not knowing who the next guest is, this is sort of my new thing. What question would you ask the next guest knowing that you don't know who they are?
So I would like to ask the person to share who is a source of inspiration for them. Who is their source of inspiration? I always like to know who inspires people to.
Beautiful. And on that note, Damian, it was such an absolute honor to spend time with you. And I very much enjoyed this conversation.
Me too. I really appreciate your invitation. I look forward to, in the future, to continue some of the topics we discussed today. And it's nice to see how we are aligned in so many ways. It sounds like I was listening to you and I thought, okay, if she would listen to my session, she would not believe it, because it's like she will be talking. What you were saying, what comes out from my mouth when I am working with my students and mentees. That was really funny.
We're like, what is it? Spiritual siblings. Like,
there's an alignment there talking about the universe.
Well, I feel very honored now.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being in the studio today.
Thank you.